Hello, scientific people. Welcome to DAV Mall Public School. Now, let's continue with the concept of reproduction in plant. So, as you can see, this is the part of a plant which consists of both male and female reproductive part. So, let's begin. Previously, we have studied about a sexual method of reproduction where only different parts of a plant take part in producing new plant. So, here we will see sexual method of reproducing. First, we will see different parts of flowers. The first one, that is sepals. This green one is the sepal. This is a small leaf, small tiny leaf, which is at the extreme level of this flower. That is not nothing but the sepals. This green portion is the sepal, followed by this colored portion, that is the petals. This petals basically attracts the insects, and after that, male reproductive part of a flower is there. That is this yellow one. This yellow portion is the male reproductive part of a flower, which consists, which we collectively call as stamen. The upper portion of this yellow portion is known as anther, and the small thread-like structure which is attached to this anther is the filament. So collectively, we call this anther and filament as stamen. So this stamen is the male reproductive part, which consists of anther and a filament. Anther is this yellow portion, and filament is the small thin-like structure which is attached with this portion. Similarly, we have the female reproductive part. As you can see, this is a female reproductive part which is present exactly at the center of this flower. This female reproductive part consists of which we call as pistil. This pistil has three segments. First, this top portion is known as stigma, the small tube-like structure which is attached with this stigma, which we call as style, and this bulging portion through which style is attached, we call this as an ovary. So basically, this flower consists of male and female reproductive part, both. Now, as you can see, this is the largest flower in the world, which is nothing but Rafflesia. So this is the largest flower in the world. So this Rafflesia flower cannot produces or reproduces naturally. So since it has some deficiency, it cannot reproduces naturally. So it exerts very rotten smell. With the help of this rotten smells, many insects it starts attracting towards this plant, and the plants starts to reproduce. Now, so let us see unisexual and bisexual flowers. So unisexual flowers, as the word itself speak, unisexual means single. So unisexual flowers are flowers of some plants that are that have either only male and female reproductive parts. Example would be papaya and cone. Whereas bisexual reproductive part of a plant consists of both male and female reproductive part, hence we say it is a bisexual flowers. Example are tomato, mustard, brinjals. So in short, unisexual flowers are those which can have either only one organ of a plant, that is, it may be either male or female reproductive part, whereas in bisexual flowers it can have both male and female reproductive organ. Example of bisexual flowers are tomato, mustard and brinjals, whereas for unisexual flowers examples are papaya, cone. So as you can see, this is a cornflower, this is a papaya plant, and this is cucumber plant. So three of these three flowers, as you can see with this picture over here, consists of only either male or female reproductive part. So hence we call this as a unisexual flowers. Whereas this mustard, rose, petunia, these are certain types of flowers which consist of both male and female reproductive part. That is, it consists of both stamen and pistil. Whereas this upper cone, papaya and cucumber, they can have either stamen or pistil portion. So let us see life cycle of a flowering plant. So the plant starts life as a seeds. As you can see, this is a seed. The plant starts its life with the help of a seeds which germinates and grow into a plant. This plant starts its life with the help of the seed, and with the help of proper nutrition, the plant starts to grow into a small plant. The mature plant produces flower. As soon as this plant starts to grow. Mature plant produces a flower. Now, after this flower has been produced, the flower fertilizes and produces a food. So this food again has some seeds, and the seeds are being produced, and the flower dies. Since again the seeds are being produced, the seeds again germinate, the plant starts to grow. The next part, that is, it produces flower. This flower produces again some small seeds. The seeds are being released into the soil, and the plant dies. This process continues. So this is a life cycle of a flowering plant. Now let us see what exactly do you mean by pollination. So as I told, the female reproductive part of a flower is the, which we call it as the stamen. So stamen consists of these small. This is a stamen which consists of a. This is a small stamen which consists of anther. This anther has a small pollen grain, small yellow portion. So this is nothing but a pollen grain. Whereas this is the female reproductive part. So when this insect sits in this pollen grain, and this pollen grain gets stuck into the leg of this pollinator, which is nothing but a, it can either be insect or a bee. And when this flies goes from one flower to another flower and stick or sit over this region, which is the female reproductive part, so that pollen are being shifted towards the stigma portion. Since the stigma is a sticky portion, that pollen gets stuck over the stigma, and after certain interval of time, the stigma is travel with the help of this style, and after certain days, it's develop and goes into ovary. In that ovary, a new plant is being produced. So in simple, we say pollination is simply the transfer of pollen grain from anther to stigma. So this is the anther, and this is the stigma. The male portion, that is the stamen. The stamen, the upper portion of the stamen is the anther. So it is simply the transfer of anther to the stigma. Anther, which is the male part, whereas the stigma is the female part. So simply the shifting of anther to stigma. It can with the help of pollinators. This is nothing but a pollinators, which we this it can either be done with the help of flies or some small insects. So the transfer of anther to stigma is pollination. Now there are again certain methods of pollination: self-pollination and cross-pollination. So self-pollination are the ones pollen grains are transferred from anther to stigma of same flowers. So this is the same. For an instant, one flower is there. So transfer of anther and stigma on the same flower with the help of certain pollinators is self-pollination. Whereas cross-pollination, pollen grains are transferred from anther to stigma of different flowers of same kind. So different flowers of same kind means, for an instant, one rose is there, one rose is present, and certain pollinators goes from one rose to another rose. This is one red rose, this is another red rose. For an instant, imagine this as one red rose and this one as another red rose. When as soon as this insect sits in this first A rose and goes to another B rose, so the transfer of pollen grain will be happening, and the new reproduction would be happening. So this is known as cross pollination. Whereas self pollination, as you might be seeing, there are certain flowers. In a flower there are numerous in a plant there are numerous flowers present. So for an instant, one pollinator sits in one flower. After certain a few minutes, that pollinator goes into the same flower of the same plant. So this, since it has the same pollination, since it is going from same plant of two different flowers, it is which we call is as self pollination. Now when two different plants of same species are there, we call this as a cross pollination. Now, pollinators in nature. There are certain pollinators. So, pollinators are agents that carry or transfer pollen grain from anther to stigma. So, these are certain agents. So, they can be either wind or through water. When winds or water are there, which we call as a biotic factor or pollinizing agent. whereas the biotic factor are birds, insects, and birds. So pollinators are agents that carry stigma or anther from one portion, one part of a flower to stigma, that is pollinators. So it can be either wind, bees, butterflies, birds, rats, and some pollinators in nature. In aquatic plants, water is an agent of pollinator. Now, what exactly is this fertilization? As I told, this is the stamen. This is a typical structure of a stamen, whereas this is a typical structure of a carpel. So this first portion, this yellow portion, which we call is as the anther. This anther consists of a pollen grain, and this is a small thin-like structure which is attached to the anther, which we call this as a filament. Similarly, the carpel consists of stigma, style, and ovary. Now, if we analyze this stamen and carpel properly, another name for stamen is androecium. This is another name for stamen, which is nothing but the male reproductive part. So this anther consists of pollen grain. So if we this pollen grain as microspongia, and this microspongia, when gets stick with the help of pollinator, it starts to fertilize. And if we analyze this female reproductive part, in scientific language we call this female reproductive part as gynoecium. As I told, the small sticky portion which is present over here is known as stigma, and the small tube light which is attached to stigma and ovule, which we call this as a style. This is a bulging portion which is nothing but an ovule. So in this ovule, megaspongium is there. Megaspongium is there, and through this megaspongium, seeds are being produced. So if I take this example of fertilization, what exactly is this fertilization? The process of fusion of male and female gamete is called fertilization. So the fusion of this is the male pollen grain, and this is the pollen grain stuck over your stigma. So the process of fusion, the process of meeting of male and female reproductive gametes or the cell, we call this as a fertilization. So the result of fusion in a cell is called as a zygote. So the zygote cell multiplies and develops into an embryo. So in this the cell travels in the form of a style, and with the help of this style, a small opening is there, and with this opening, seeds are being produced. So the seeds are over here. This is a seed which are being produced. You will analyze this concept, how exactly a new plant is being produced in your higher classes. For a time being, simply you have to remember that fertilization is simply the process of fusion of male and female gamete. So the result of a fusion of male and female is nothing but a zygote, and this zygote cell multiplies and it produces an embryo. Embryo is nothing but a small seed. So after fertilization, what exactly happens to flowers? So after fertilization, the flower look like this. The petals with head or petals starts to disconnect from the main portion. The ovary begins to swell. So slowly and steadily, ovary starts to elaborate, and after certain days, these seeds develop inside the fruits. Seeds develop into a seeds, fruits, and the plants or the fruits which we get are produced. Now, development of fruits and seeds. For an instant, floral part, the sepal, petals, and stamen, after fertilization, they all wither. Whereas the female reproductive part, that is ovary, ovule, integuments, fertilized egg, it becomes fruit. This ovary become fruit. Ovary wall become fruit wall. This ovule becomes seed. Integuments becomes seed coat, tester, and the fertilized eggs become an embryo. So this is the floral part before fertilization, and after fertilization it becomes this. I hope you have understood the concept. Thank you.